Okay, well, let's get started. Thanks everybody for joining us this evening. My name is Mark Dolan. I'm the chair of the WPV-CERT committee. I'd like to thank all of our community volunteers and firefighter paramedics who participate in this program. That includes Cam McCowan, our course coordinator, Chip Swan, Dave Ellison, Dr. Vicky Coe, and our firefighter paramedics. Selena is unable to join us tonight, but she might pop in a little bit later in the evening. So we are on our second discussion session. This is our schedule as we come up here over the next month and a half, 2 months. Tonight we're going to be discussing primarily the CERT organization, Unit 2. Also want to point out we do have our upcoming training webinars. On December 12th, we have our radio operations class. I encourage you to sign up for that one. You can go to wpv-cert.org and go to the events page and you can sign up for that there. Okay, I'm going to switch slides here real quick, so just give me a second. Okay, so tonight we're going to be talking about the CERT organization, which a lot of this talks about the incident command system. And again, these sessions are not meant to actually teach this material. We're here to talk about how it applies to us locally, as well as kind of expand on some of the points and questions that we typically get in the in-person class, and to give you an opportunity to ask questions about the material and kind of solidify your knowledge on it. So we're going to talk about the purpose of on-scene management, incident command system, and the CERT organization in general. So some really important parts about managing a disaster situation is we need to have clear leadership. So that means we develop a chain of command and roles of all the team members so that they understand the place within that organization that they fit. We want to make sure that we're maintaining the safety of our disaster workers, and that means we're continually prioritizing our activities based on our team's capabilities and our training. And we want to be maximally effective in our response, and we do that by prioritizing based on, again, rescuer safety and doing the greatest good for the greatest number. And one of the key things that we do to make this system work is we use the incident command system. So a key part of this is we need to identify the scope of the incident. What is the problem? And then we have to think about what's our overall strategy and what can we as CERT members do? How are we going to deploy our resources and who's going to do what? And then we also talk about documentation, because if it's not written down, it didn't happen. So we use ICS, or Incident Command System. And it's a way of being able to flexibly use resources for a particular incident. And there's a couple key concepts. One of these is unity of command, and that simply means that each CERT member reports to only one person. So you only have one person who you're reporting to. We have a manageable span of control, and that's 3 to 7 subordinates. And that just simply makes it so that one person can't effectively be responsible for managing 20 people or 50 people, but they can be expected to manage 3 to 7 people. And then we use common terminology or plain language. So within the ICS world or incident response worlds, we don't use jargon like 10 codes or other things that other people won't understand. We use simple, plain language. There's 5 major components: command, operations, planning, logistics, and finance and administration. And what I like to do is show this as a business organizational chart. So we've all seen these type of org charts. We've got our president or CEO at the top, and then we have various other positions underneath. So to kind of visually show how we can convert a business organizational chart into an ICS organizational chart, I'm just going to kind of quickly step through this. So we take our president, CEO, and we call them the incident commander, or IC. In the material, you're going to notice that it's also called the team leader, or TL. Then we have some other positions in a business, like public relations. In the ICS world, we call that the Public Information Officer, or PIO. And then we might have a safety officer and a liaison officer. The liaison officer's job is to interact with other organizations, such as the towns or fire, law enforcement. And then below here, we have lots of just departments that you might see in a regular business, things like sales, manufacturing. And in the ICS world, we convert these into operations, planning. There's no such thing as sales in incident response, fortunately. Logistics, and finance and administration. So this is a basic ICS org chart. Now the key part about ICS is that it can scale. So you can use the incident command system for a small incident where you maybe have just a handful of people involved, or a very large incident. And this is an example of a very large ICS structure that you might see in a major wildland incident or some other very, very large incident. Now, here in the CERT world, we're never going to have a organizational structure this large by any means, but this just gives you an idea of how ICS can expand to go all the way from small to very large incidents. So in this case, this might be a wildland fire that has thousands of people involved. And of course, if you have thousands of people involved, you have to have a very well-defined organizational structure. So here's another way of thinking about these different positions within the ICS world. Our CERT team leader, or the incident commander, they're thinking about what to do. What are we doing? They are the leader of the group. And then the operations section chief is concerned about how do we do it? And they manage the teams that are out there in the field actually doing things. So they're the doers. Then we have the planning or intelligence section chief, and they're thinking about what's going on. They're collecting and displaying information, and they're making incident plans, or IAPs, incident action plans. So they're the thinkers. Logistics is all about how to support it. They're managing the resources, the supplies, and equipment. So they're the supporters. And then administration, they're concerned about what gets recorded, collecting, compiling, and storing the documentation. We don't typically need this role here in the CERT world, but essentially administration is how money gets reimbursed for these type of incidents in professional response. So it's very important that all this gets recorded so that people can get reimbursed for their costs. So they are the recorders. So leader, doer, thinker, supporter, recorder. That's just a simple way to understand these roles. So who is the incident commander or team leader? Well, it's normally assumed by the first person on scene. So if you're the first CERT member at the staging location, congratulations, you're the incident commander. The position may be transferred when a more qualified person arrives. The command post, or ICPs, which stands for Incident Command Post, is a location that's established by the CERT leader, or the incident commander, for the command and control of the incident. It's located near, but out of the disaster scene. So in a fire, like for example, when an incident commander establishes the command post for a residential structure fire, they're usually setting up the command post across the street from the building that's on fire. So they can see what's happening, but they're not directly impeding or interfering with the response activities. And then the CERT leader or incident commander may appoint operations, planning, logistics, safety officers, or other roles within this organization as the incident expands. This doesn't mean that every incident needs to have all of these different roles staffed. And in fact, the incident commander, if it's a small incident, will handle all of these roles in his or her own capacity. But if he or she is getting busy with these activities, then you want to build the organization so that you're properly delegating tasks so that you don't become overwhelmed. And a CERT incident may be any size. So as I've been mentioning, it can be a small incident with just a few people involved, or we could have a major earthquake where we have 50 or 100 or 150 CERT members that are all coming together at a staging location. And that's where this becomes very important to understand how the organization structure works and how we scale up so we can maximally use all of our resources. So the CERT team leader is the incident commander unless they're working as part of a larger ICS structure. So if we were asked to assist, let's say the fire department had a situation where they wanted CERTs to assist, in that case, the incident commander will be one of the fire officers, the battalion chiefs or the chief. That's the IC. It won't be one of the CERT members. But if we're operating independently and you're not working in part of a larger ICS structure, then we will have an incident commander who's responsible for the overall management of our CERT teams. So again, they establish the command post, they set the objectives and priorities, and they assign personnel as needed. And they also communicate with other authorities such as police, fire, town EOCs in the county. I'm not going to dive in any deeper on the specific section chiefs, but except for operations, because operations section chief is usually probably one of the first that would be assigned. The operations section chief's job is to develop the operational tactics and to actually conduct those operations out in the field. So they are deploying the resources and telling them what to do. They're saying, team 1, your job is to go do X. Team 2, your job is to go do Y. And this is how it would practically look like in a larger scale CERT operation. So as you see at the top, we have our operations section chief, and then he or she might appoint some group leaders. In this case, we have a medical group leader who then has different teams working under that leader. So medical transportation, medical treatment, morgue team, and then back up at the top, search and rescue group leader, and he or she may be managing multiple search and rescue teams. So this is what the organizational chart might look like underneath the operations section chief. So in summary, organizing is key. We have to organize if we're going to be effective. But don't get caught up in the ICS rules about span of control and things like that. Just know the basic concepts and make it work for you. And only assign those positions that make sense given that incident. So again, small incidents, we're not going to have all these positions. A big incident where we've got a large number of team members involved, then we need to set up the organizational structure so that it makes sense. Always know what resources you have available, maintain your situational awareness, and number 1 is always maintaining safety of rescue personnel. Just going to switch slides here real quick. Okay, so now I'm going to dive into more of the specifics about how it works here within the WPV-CERT program. And as we mentioned last time, we do have a standard operating procedures or SOP. It is on our website. If you just go to the homepage, you'll see a link to the SOP. Everybody should read it and understand it. It's our rules of the road and how we work as a program. It is a PDF document. You can see it at the first page here. So please take a look at that. We do want everybody to take the independent study or IS 100 and 700 classes. These dive deeper into the incident command system and the National Incident Management System. These are online classes. Here are the links to the classes and how to register so that you can get your FEMA student ID. Once you do the online class, you'll take a brief, I believe it's 25-question test, and then you'll get an online certificate, which we'll need to get a copy of from you. So here in the Woodside Portola Valley area, we have 3 incident command posts that would be established in a major incident. The Woodside location, staging location, would be at the Mounted Patrol Grounds. In Portola Valley, it's at the Portola Valley Town Center. And at Skyline, it's up at the intersection of Highway 84 and Skyline. These are the locations where we would establish incident command posts in a major incident, where we weren't working in a smaller scale situation, like maybe we were requested to help with a certain task and we were told, let's all meet at this location. This would be how we would organize in a major incident where, let's say there's a major earthquake. If you're available to assist, you would go to one of these locations and stage there. We're going to talk more about CERT activation and mobilization, which is specifically how this would work. But first, I want to ask if anybody has any questions about what I've just talked about with regard to the Incident Command System, or ICS. If there's any questions I can answer, you feel free to put it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself.
I have a question about the staging areas. So I live in Woodside, though I'm about halfway between the two, the Portola Valley and the Woodside staging areas. I usually go to the Portola Valley Library. How would the tasks differ between those two staging areas, and if they were both activated?
Yeah, great question. So in a major incident, like a major earthquake, you're going to go to whatever staging area you can go to. If that means, I like to use the example, if you live in Portola Valley, yet you're having dinner at Buck's and there's a major earthquake, and you know that the Woodside staging area is the Mounted Patrol Grounds, and you just happen to feel like you wanted to participate, but it wasn't practical for you to go back to Portola Valley, then you're 100% welcome to come to the Woodside staging location. So as far as we as an organization, we are all CERT members, part of the WPV-CERT program. And so where you live specifically does not mean you have to go to a staging location that's associated with where you live or the closest one. Now, the roles of these different locations are all going to be the same. They're going to be to assemble or stage resources, so incoming CERT members, and then each one of those CERT members will be part of a response from within that branch. And so that the Woodside branch is going to be focusing on incidents generally within the Woodside area. Portola Valley is going to be focusing on incidents generally within the Portola Valley area. And then up on Skyline. And then those 3 branches are also going to be coordinating. And so we might have a situation where, let's say Portola Valley has 50 CERT members that show up, and maybe in Woodside we have 10 CERT members that show up, and maybe we quickly recognize that we have a whole bunch of incidents happening in Woodside, and we need more assistance. The command post will be coordinating that, and so we can say, all right, Portola Valley, you've got 20 extra CERT members. Send them over here. We need them. So it's going to be a dynamic situation, but that's something that we practice, or we're practicing more. We also have our command post training class coming up in January. That talks more about how we manage the command posts and do incident management kind of at that higher level. Does that answer?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Well, Mark, it's Vic Schachter. I don't know if you can answer this question or not. We have in Portola Valley several neighborhood emergency preparedness groups. Mine is on Golden Hills Drive. We've got 30 families that have been trained, organized. We set up our various procedures in the event of an emergency. Am I correct in assuming, and we have a command post that's been set up on Golden Hills, which is a fairly long street with these 30 families. I'm assuming that in the event of an emergency, we would go first to our neighborhood and see what's going on there, and then turn to what's going on in the town in a larger sense. or in the Woodside Fire District. Do you have any guidance or opinion about that? Because there could be a conflicting situation. And I think there's several of these neighborhood groups at the ranch and up in Ladera and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to make sure that any CERT member is paying attention to their family, their local home, their neighbors, and any neighborhood organization that's been established. Like you mentioned, you have a group of people, you have a location that you've designated to meet. And we want all CERT members to understand any of those local implementations that are in place. Your neighbors may have chosen that you're going to gather at this location, check on each other, see what needs to be done. You should absolutely do that. And then if there's no need, for example, let's say your neighborhood has no damage, there's nothing that needs to be done there. If you have the CERT skills and training, then you would go down to the staging location to be part of a larger response effort. So yeah, you always stay local until you're at a place where you can offer your skills and resources to the greater community. Does that help, Vic?
Yes, that answers my question.
Great. And a key part of this is that as a CERT program, we recognize that we service the entire district. And so there will likely be needs in parts of the district and not needs in other parts in the district. And that's a big part of ICS, is that you take your resources and you apply them to the areas of the greatest need, right? So if you have resources available and those resources don't get properly assigned to tasks, then there could be a building burning down the road, but somebody stopped to, help somebody who tripped and needs their shoelaces tied. The resources need to be applied to the areas of greatest need. And so that's one of the benefits of the CERT organizational model, is that we stage, just like professional response organizations, we stage our resources, and then the incident commander, the command post, is tracking all the incidents and properly assigning resources to where we can do the greatest for them. Okay, any other questions about CERT organization? And I can't really see the chat, so I'm hoping somebody will.
There is a question on the chat, really talking about the best practices of communication. So in that relationship between the organized divisions and the CERT, what is the current model for the best communication?
So we do have our communications class coming up here in December. And so I will punt that question to that class, because we're going to dive into that much more deeply. Carol, you got a question?
Yep.
Go ahead,
Mark,
Carol.
actually, I just put one out there and said, whatever radio you can best make the initial contact with is what you would use, and that the people that you contact would then coordinate with you to set up the best communications channels. But you're absolutely right. We'll go into that in much more detail in the radio class. So
yeah.
I have a question.
Mark, I think he answered my question that I had asked in the chat. It's about the division radios versus the GMRS radios. Will you go over that in the communication class?
Yeah, we're gonna do a 2-hour deep dive on this, and so we'll answer all those questions. We'll put up all the charts and flesh out all the questions with respect to radios at that class.
Okay.
I have a follow-on to Vic Shatner's question.
Yeah, go Donnie.
So I'm thinking practically 204 homes. Will you let us know if you need help?
Oh yeah.
Will you, I mean, you'll contact us through the town radio, our radio room will be manned.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
of what you said about them. I mean, how will we know? Okay, well, we've taken care of most of our problems. Are we helping someone who tripped when you've got something much more critical going on?
Right, absolutely. So that's a great question, Donnie. So we do have the communications capabilities to stay in touch, and I would hope that if you have 200 families or 200 people that are up there, and you don't, or you either need assistance or can offer assistance, then we would be communicating those things. And this is the type of thing where we need to do the actual full-scale exercises, which hopefully by mid next year we'll be able to do to kind of training is an important part of this. And I know we've made some changes to the organization, and fleshing out some of these specific details is something that we will definitely make as a priority for our exercises. And as soon as we can actually get one on the calendar, I'm going to be really excited to actually do that, because we'll be able to really make it clear for everybody involved how they're going to communicate, where people are supposed to go, and really flesh all this out in detail.
Mark, I have one question. This is Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi. So my brother-in-law is a fire chief, and he was explaining the way that they assign things, even if there's some kind of a catastrophe or whatnot. He might say, hey, you go spray down that shed so it doesn't light on fire. And the fireman has to turn to him and say, I accept that assignment, because they might be looking at it and seeing something that would be actually unsafe, or they don't really feel confident to do it for one reason or another. Are we gonna go through that kind of communication skill about emergency situations later on?
That's a really great question. I think a key part of the CERT program is that we are not professional responders, and we don't go and put ourselves into danger. So professional firefighters, police officers, other first responders, their job is to go and put themselves in danger. In the CERT organization, our job is to do the best we can for the greatest number of people, with the key premise that we always work within our training, and we are always focused on the safety of our CERT team members. So in the example you just gave, if I'm an incident commander and I say I need a team of 3 people to go and spray down that building, and let's say that somebody said, well, wait a second, that is way beyond the skill and scope of what I can do as a CERT. I'm not trained to do it. I'm not confident. I'm not equipped. Then they should absolutely say, no, thanks. At the same point, whoever was assigning that task should have known beforehand that that is outside of the scope of our program. So just like if I was to go ask somebody to go do traffic control, I would want to make sure that that person was trained in traffic control. I'm not just going to go send somebody who doesn't have the training and the skills and the equipment and the supervision to do that task successfully. So that's a big part of the CERT program. We are not professional first responders. We do not put ourselves in danger. We work within our skills and our competencies. If there's ever a task that's assigned or given to you that you're not comfortable doing or you don't think is safe, then you say that. You say, I'm not going to do that. I don't think that's safe.
Thank you.
And Mark, this is Cam. If I could just add in another component of this that I think is really important to highlight is that quality of communication that she described, where when someone makes a request, it is then confirmed back to the person making the request. This is a concept called closed loop communication. And it is something that is a valuable skill that we will continue to reinforce within all CERT teams, and is a very important thing because there is so much opportunity for error that by taking the way that we communicate with each other to being what seems like over the top obvious, then reduces the chances of errors. And I think that that is really a good point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Closed loop communications is something we'll also talk about in the radio class. But Cam, that's a great point. Also want to point out that within our organization, we're going to go into documentation in a little bit, but for example, when a team is assigned a task, that should be written down, and that task should be prepared on a form, or form number 1, which is a blank piece of paper, and it should be written down what the task is, and then that's given to the team leader. the team leader acknowledges that task, and then they go off and do what they need to do. We'll go more into the documentation. And I know a lot of this is hard to understand if you haven't actually participated in a drill or exercise. When we do finally get to see each other and do a drill, you're going to get to actually do this all hands-on, and it will make much more sense in that case.
I just want to add, and we're going to go over this more in the section on disaster psychology, but you might feel very ready to go out and take on whatever task someone asks you to do, and you don't realize until you're confronted with a very small fire that for some reason you have a deep-seated fear of fire. And now your heart's pumping and you just want to run away. Well, trust your gut, because if you try to force yourself into that, you could easily become a victim. You're not going to react right. You're at risk, and we don't want that to happen. So just remember, you're always in this voluntarily. And if your gut is telling you something is beyond you, trust it. Don't worry. Someone else will cover it or not. It doesn't matter, but you need to not become a victim.
Yeah. So we're not going to really cover it. We're not going to go into any more than what is already in the unit, but that brings up an important part of scene size up. And as Chip just mentioned, if you get an assignment, your task is to make sure that whatever you're doing safely, and that you're sizing up the scene. And that's something you do constantly. You're constantly sizing up the scene. So if you get on scene, the first thing you need to do is use your eyes and ears and look around and see what's happening. You might notice that there's a down power line. If you just walked through that down power line, that could be bad news. So it's very important. Professional responders, sometimes somebody will say, gosh, they're going so slowly. Well, they're going slowly because they're being very cognizant about what's happening around them. And in any emergency situation, that's changing and constantly adapting. So they are constantly doing scene size up. The unit goes into this much more than we're going to talk about right now, but just be aware that you should always approach these situations cautiously, meticulously. You've got your eyes open, you're listening, you're paying attention to what's happening. Very important. You don't just run in to a building that's collapsed to try to find and rescue somebody. You're looking at the building. What are the hazards? Is it going to collapse? Are there aftershocks? All of these things, very important. All right, any other questions before I go on to activation and mobilization? Okay, great. So the next question here, as it applies to our program locally, is, well, how am I going to know if CERT is activated? So after you've taken this class and you're a CERT member, how do I know that I'm needed? Well, SMC alert. Make sure that you've signed up for SMC alert, and then you need to go into the section where it says, how can you help in an emergency, and make sure that you've checked that CERT trained box. Once you've done that, we can send a message to you through all the regular SMC channels that you've signed up for. So that being phone calls to your home phone calls to your cell phone, text messages, emails, all those that you've selected to be contacted. Then if we send out a CERT activation message, you're going to receive it in those ways. So we have in our SOP, which again, please take a look and read our SOP, Standard Operating Procedures. We do have a self-activation, or what in the SOP is called a standing order activation. Now, as CERT members, we don't self-activate or self-respond to regular routine incidents. So for example, you're driving down Woodside Road and you see a car has pulled over, and there's a police officer next to him, and it looks like something's going on. Well, you don't throw on your CERT vest, you don't put on your CERT backpack and go show up and say, hey, what do you need? That would be a self-activation. As CERT team members, we only activate when we're activated through official channels, which is the fire district, the towns, other methods as outlined in our SOP, or in a standing order activation, which the text that we've used in our SOP is, if a large-scale earthquake occurs, very strong shaking for roughly 20 seconds or longer, or when a major incident has occurred where it can be reasonably expected that CERT would be activated, but regular communication methods are not available, ... report to your branch staging or command post. So this is the only way that we self-activate. So unless we've been told to activate, we can self-activate in a major earthquake or other major incident where we would reasonably expect that we would have been activated. And in that case, we go to the branch staging location. And as mentioned earlier, it doesn't matter which one you go to. If you're having dinner at Buck's and you want to go to the Woodside staging, that's great. If you're having dinner up on Skyline, you can go to the Skyline staging. It doesn't matter. We're all CERT members. If these locations change for some reason, let's say that the town center is, been heavily damaged and the new staging location is, let's say at the Priory or some other location, we're going to communicate that over radios. And I'm not going to go into the details of that because, again, we're going to cover that in great depth in our radio training class. But we do have two-way radios that we can use to communicate these changes. So if we need to shuffle this around in a major incident, Mata Patrol Grounds is uninhabitable, we're going to shuffle it around and communicate those over the radio. Carol, you have a question?
Yes, Mark, we need to get together regarding the container near Skyline because it is currently behind a locked gate and they change the combo frequently. So I need to chat with you about this. Okay. And if people say they're eating up at Alice's, it's actually hard to find too. It's not like there's signs to it. So we need to plan this out a little more.
Sounds good.
But I appreciate the work you've done so far.
Thank you. So a key part of when we mobilize as a CERT team is that we must check in and we stage for assignments. So the importance of this is that we need personnel accountability. So the incident commander's job, amongst others, is to make sure that we have accountability of all of our resources. And a key part of that is we need to make sure that when you show up at that location that you check in. And that can simply be done on a personnel sign-in sheet. There's a standard form for this, but if you don't have one available, just take out a blank piece of paper and say, everybody sign in. Also make sure you sign out. Because if I have somebody showing up at my command post and says, hi, I'm looking for Jim Smith, I need to know where that person is. They checked in an hour ago, they were assigned to team 1, that's where they are. Or they checked in, they checked out. As far as I'm concerned, they're no longer on the CERT team at this time. Accountability is key. So just know that when you show up at any of our CERT events, we're going to need you to check in, and you always need to check out. The other key part of the ICS concept is that resources get staged for assignment. And this goes back to what I was talking about where you might have a CERT team and they stop to help somebody or to do a task, but there's a greater need for that team. The whole purpose of resources staged for assignment is that resources don't just come in and start doing whatever task they see or think is important. They stage to be assigned to a particular role. That way, there's a person or a group of people in the command post who are looking at the priorities and assigning resources to those priorities. This is incredibly important for very large scale incidents. If you could imagine, if you ordered 500 fire engines to come and work on a massive wildfire, they don't just show up and start doing any task. They check in and they get assigned a task and they go to staging. So the staging concept is used across professional incident management all the time. Resources stage, they get assigned, they go do the task. They might do the task and become freed up from the task, and then they go back into staging, and then they can get reassigned a task. So
and Mark, if I could just jump in and just add that this is actually one of those things that sounds simple, but when you are eager to help and you're eager to do something, that patience of waiting until you're assigned a task is a part of the discipline that comes with being a member of a CERT team. And it is something that comes with practice, and it also comes with developing the trust in the group. But it is, I would just want to reemphasize how vitally important that is.
Yeah, thank you for that. I know that at our last exercise, there was the comment of, why did we sit around for 20 minutes to get assigned a task? Well, that, as Cam just said, that's part of the process. The command post team and staff are allocating the resources, they're figuring out where to assign them, they're filling out the paperwork, they're getting the team leaders. So it does take time and it can be a little frustrating, but it's a core part of being effective. We have to be organized. So here's kind of an edge case. We've had this question in the past, and that's, well, what if I can't reach a staging location or the command post? What if I'm stuck up somewhere? Can I still participate? Well, yes, you can. But as part of this accountability, we need to know what tasks you're doing and where you are. And so we need to initiate supervision of you and have the command post understand what you're doing. So you can check in using our radio. Again, we'll go into radios in our class, but if you are in a location where you have a group of CERT members that are going to be doing tasks, but you cannot check in at one of these branch staging or command post locations, then please check in with the radio and make sure that the command post knows who you are and what you're doing so that we can check on you. And if we don't hear back from you, then we can go send somebody to look for you. Okay, any questions on the mobilization part of this? How we get activated, the difference between a standing order activation versus an official activation, how we stage, how we sign in. Any questions about that?
There's a question in the chat of what are the requirements to become an incident commander or a team leader?
Of a branch, specifically of a branch.
Sure, great question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So our program is set up so that, just like all CERT programs, the first person on scene is the incident commander. Now, you may have limited skills as being an incident commander, but this is the way our program works. The first person on scene is the incident commander. And you're going to do the best job that you can until somebody that has additional qualification or skills comes that you might be able to pass the IC role to. So any of our CERT team members can become an incident commander. You're going to do the best job you can. And then we have what we call our incident management team, or IMT. And these are going to be people, and we just started this program, so this is not a large group of people. But if you want to become part of the incident management team, there are additional qualifications that you're going to need to meet, classes you need to take, exercises you need to participate in, that will give you additional training on how to be an incident commander, how to run the command post, additional incident command system training, so that you have more confidence in that role. So, for example, if you, Carol, as an example, up on Skyline, if you show up and you're the first person there at the Skyline branch, you're the incident commander for that branch. Now, let's say that somebody who's on our incident management team an hour later shows up. Well, you're probably going to pass command to the incident management team leader, because in that case, they are more trained in that skill. But everybody should understand that you, as a CERT team member, can and will be the incident commander if you are the first person on scene. And just know that if an incident management team member shows up, then they're probably going to take over that role because they're more trained in it. Does that answer your question?
Well, this is all new. WPV-CERT is new. And I have probably 30 block captains in my division alone. And I've trained them that whoever shows up first is the incident commander. And now we've suddenly become a branch, and we have a container, and we have a division radio and a ham radio. And I'm just saying now it's confusing. I may have a person who's not a WPV-CERT member who is acting like an IC. And also one last wrinkle is that John Carnes, the previous division leader, has said he would step in and help out in a real emergency. So I'd just like to discuss that further and have more clarity.
Sure, those are all great questions, and I hope we can have a good discussion about the details on that, so it is clear.
Well, I just think you should come up with a short description that these are your requirements to be a branch IC, and one of them probably is CERT team member. And we need to be clear on it. Some
and just to be clear, we are talking about the CERT team, and so I understand that there's WPV ready divisions, but what we're talking about specifically now is the CERT incident commander. So you do need to be a CERT trained person to be a CERT incident commander.
Yeah, the confusion comes in that we will share this container, and it's mostly my division that runs it. So
sure.
I don't think I'm the only division that has this problem either. I'm sure that might come into play.
Sure.
In the other branches.
Sure, I understand the issue there. So that's something we will definitely try to make sure is more clearly communicated and documented as we work through this process.
And Mark, there's another question very much in the same vein that comes from Frank Rosenblum saying, how does being a block captain coincide with being a CERT member? And I think that this is part of that. We're creating a scalable, a multi-tiered system. And so that is part of what is developing. And what we're doing right now is really focusing on that region-wide response that is the CERT response. And there definitely will be a relationship with the local division level response. And there will be some overlap, but there will also be distinctions.
Yes, thank you, Cam. Good, very good point there. Okay, so I'm going to briefly touch on documentation, and then we're going to wrap this up. But as mentioned before, it's very important that we write everything down. So each one of us has a responsibility to document your actions, your observations, what's happening. All CERT members need to have the universal form, or AKA form number 1, which is blank sheets of paper in your CERT backpack so that you can document, write things down. There's several standardized forms that the CERT program uses. They're based upon the official ICS forms. They've been adapted to be a little bit simpler and more focused towards CERT team activities. These forms are on our website. If you go to the Learn Resources section, you'll see that there's a CERT forms category. You can go there and you can download all these forms. And in addition, on there, there are 2 documents which summarize the forms and how they would be used. So again, the unit goes into this, but there's some additional information. If you're curious about these forms, then please go to our website and look at that document. Once you get your CERT backpacks, make sure you have blank paper in there. I'd recommend a set of damage assessment forms, and as well as some general message forms. But bottom line is have pens and papers in your backpack, because you're going to need to document things.
And I just placed a link to those CERT forms in the chat box.
Perfect, thank you. Bottom line, every team or group needs to have a scribe. So let's say you were assigned to be a team of 3 and your job was to go do damage assessment. You're going to have a team leader. You're going to have a scribe. Always make sure somebody's appointed as a scribe. That way, that person's job is to make sure things are being documented. This is one of those documents that describes the forms and what they do. I'm not going to go into the details on this. I'm just putting this up here so that you know that it's available for you. So as the link that Cam put up there, you can go and read this. These are the different forms that we use for different purposes. We're going to go into much more detail on this in our command post ICS training class in January. So for those that expressed an interest in more of the ICS command post incident command side of this, then that would be a class that you're going to want to take. But bottom line, form number 1 always works. And now I'm going to pass it to Cam. Cam, are you there?
Sorry about that. I was having a delayed mute unmute issue. Yeah, so that is, we've now gone over kind of the units 1 and 2, disaster preparedness and CERT organization, and we're heading into units 3 and 4 with disaster medical operations. Go ahead, next slide. And we realized a little bit recently that we may have put a lot of content coming up for 1 week. And so we really want to emphasize the fact that this is an overview and is to give you kind of a framework for thinking about both first aid from the perspective of what are life-threatening conditions, what are the things that we need to respond to immediately, and how do we respond to them? And then some follow-up basic first aid in terms of the how to handle then situations that are serious but not life-threatening, and also really how to know the difference. One thing that I really want to emphasize, though, is that this is an introduction. We will follow up with, and in fact, we strongly encourage people to take, let me say again, actually to be a CERT member, you will be required to take a first aid class and CPR class, which will be a component of that. And quite honestly, we're hoping to have some additional CERT first responder level training. This is something that is lifelong skills that, and so I really want to encourage you that when you go through this unit, to think of it as you're reading the table of contents, not a matter of trying to be the master of everything that you see there. So unit 3 is very much kind of about the on an individual basis. And then unit 4 is really talking about how does this work on an operational basis? Not how do we respond to an individual, but how do we coordinate it when we have a mass, what's called an MCI or mass casualty incident. And a lot of this is the fundamentals of what's known as triage. That idea of how do we operationally make decisions so that we can do the most good for the most people. And so we'll cut into some of that. What are the functions within medical operations? How do we manage those treatment areas? And then getting into some public health considerations. So just looking ahead, do the best that you can in terms of covering this material, but also know that, as is true for all of our classes, and especially as we get into the holiday seasons, that if you fall behind unit-wise, that is not an issue. We can have people join this class up to the time that we're doing the skills testing, and that to definitely, if you feel a little daunted by that, consider that a welcome challenge, but not something to stop you from being engaged. Are there any questions looking forward to the disaster medical operations that we're going to be moving into? Taking a look at the chat, I will definitely reinforce to the list, and also in a way that you can cut and paste about starting the class late, because we definitely do encourage people. For those of you who are also renewing it and that this is reinforcement, I want to yet again plant the seed that one of the ways of really reinforcing this knowledge, there's no such thing as seeing it too many times. And that if you want to become involved on an instructor level, that's a great way of taking it to the next level. And we are always looking for new instructors. Let me take a look and see. Someone else is going to be said they're taking a work-sponsored American Heart Association class with AED and CPR online training. Yes, that will count. We will also, when we are permitted to do in person, we will reinforce it as well. But in terms of for the checkbox, yes, the online course from American Heart Association will qualify. Are we going to offer disaster medical class again? Yes, it is definitely our intention. I am an American Heart Association and a what's called an ASHE first aid instructor. We have a pool of some other instructors. If anyone on this call is also an instructor, we'd welcome you, because this is something that is what we call a perishable skill. I will be perfectly frank that the reason why I got into teaching this material is because I am blessed with not running into bloody bodies on a regular basis. And therefore, the way that I keep my skills up is through becoming an instructor. And so we encourage people to become, even if you've seen it before, even if you've done it before, renewal is always beneficial. Okay, let me take a quick look and see if there's anything else. Let's see, it's being slow to scroll. I don't think there are any other questions at this point. Just to close the class, we really want to thank you again and again. We are all volunteers. We are doing this for the benefit of our neighbors, of our families, of our friends, and of our community. And you are the reason why we're doing this. And we are, and also I want to reinforce that we are an evolving, growing organization. And so your constructive input into how we can continue to grow is very, very welcome. And that's all I have to say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cam. Thank you all very much. It's 6:59, so I think we did pretty well on the time. Thank you all for the questions. See you next week.
Yay, good job.
Thanks very much. All right. Take care, everybody.